If you've ever had that feeling that life is requiring you to carry a load that's just, well, not sustainable, a weight that feels like it stretches beyond what a person can endure, then this deep dive is absolutely for you. We've got a really unique source in front of us today. It's a year-end message from the Faith Beams GP podcast, and it's framed as a gentle invitation to rest, reflect, and receive hope.
It's a fascinating document, really, because it doesn't bother with platitudes. It sets the scene immediately by acknowledging this huge emotional range of its audience. The speaker knows, you might be listening in a quiet living room feeling perfectly safe, but they're also speaking to someone who might be in a crowded shelter or a hospital or just alone in the middle of the night dealing with a very real crisis.
Okay, so let's unpack that. That's a pretty unusual approach. The core mission of the source is, it's really powerful, it says, when the world feels heavy, you are not meant to carry life alone. So our job today is to look at how this message lays out these very specific systemic modern burdens.
Right, not just personal feelings of failure.
Exactly. And then how it gives us these compelling real-world examples of collective resilience, counter-narrative.
And the central conflict, which gives the whole thing its power, really, is the honest recognition that so many people all over the world are carrying this unexpected surplus of burden. And it lists them: grief, fear, financial pressure, trauma. It starts by just validating that overwhelming weight, which I think makes the message of hope that follows feel completely earned.
It does. And that validation, it starts with a pretty stark diagnosis, doesn't it? Naming that unbearable weight. The source grounds all this modern exhaustion in this ancient text, Isaiah 46.1. It says, "Bell bows down, Nebo stoops. What you carry is burdensome, a load too heavy for you."
And what stands out there is the connection the source makes. It looks at this ancient text describing these, literal heavy idols being carted around, and it zeroes in on that last phrase, a load too heavy for you. The point is that this feeling isn't new. It's a human condition. But today it shows up as these really complex modern anxieties, systemic failures even.
That's a powerful way to frame it. It shifts the blame, from what's wrong with me to the load is too heavy. So when the source says a load too heavy for you, what does it actually mean in today's world? What's in that catalog of modern burdens that it says are just too heavy for human shoulders?
It's a real deep dive into societal strain. We're not talking about, small daily frustrations. The source points to the breakdown of fundamental structures. So the list is pretty sobering. First, it says systems that fail. This is about things like supply chains or healthcare just not being there, forcing you, the individual, to shoulder all the risk. Then it talks about promises that collapse.
So like a loss of trust in institutions.
Exactly. A real erosion of trust in governments, institutions, you name it.
And then beyond those big structural failures, the message really gets personal, right?
Yeah.
It talks about the consequences.
It does. The list goes on. There's acute economic pressure. I mean, you see that everywhere with inflation. Then there's the pervasive fear of the unknown, this deep anxiety about what's coming next. And finally, trauma from violence and emotional exhaustion, basically being responsible for way more than any one person can handle. It's really a diagnosis of burnout, but a global one, rooted in instability.
I feel like I could check off at least a couple of those just this morning.
Yeah.
It really grounds the discussion. And to connect this analysis directly to you, the listener, the source asks you to pause and reflect. It's a call for non-judgmental truth. Just asking yourself, what have I been carrying this year? What has felt heavier than I expected?
And that phrase, only honesty, is so critical. It gives you permission to just drop the performance. The message also makes a point of going global with this. It refuses to limit the suffering to one place. It acknowledges families displaced by war, parents who don't know how to provide for their kids, entire communities grieving. And the really profound observation is that even with all that, people keep waking up. They keep hoping. They keep praying.
That is the crucial pivot. Once the diagnosis is clear that this weight is real and unbearable, the message transitions. It doesn't try to solve it with an easy answer. It observes resilience in 4 very different parts of the world. It shows us the architecture of hope in action.
That's right. We shift from acknowledging the weight to seeing hope in action.
Yeah.
And these 4 geographic case studies, they show that resilience is, well, it's deeply contextual. It looks completely different depending on where you are.
Okay, so let's start with Africa. The message calls it hope in community.
Yeah.
This seems like a really high contrast to the Western focus on individual struggle.
It is, absolutely. The source points out that in many parts of Africa, with rising costs and uncertainty, strength wasn't found in wealth. That was often impossible. It was found in community, in horizontal structures. The resilience is all about mutual caring. And this is tangible stuff. It's neighbors sharing the one meal they have. It's churches opening their doors for shelter, not just for worship. Yeah. People praying together out in the open, admitting they need help. Their support system is relational.
Yeah.
Not institutional.
That's such a picture of resilience through shared vulnerability.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the Caribbean. Here, the focus shifts to resilience after physical loss.
Right. And here, the hope is about persistence. It's about slowly rebuilding after storms and hardship. The source says faith acts like a daily anchor. The message people share isn't about getting rich quick. It's about something much more grounded. It's, we are still here and God is still with us. The act of just clearing debris or planting a new garden, that itself becomes an act of faith. It's about endurance.
Now, you contrast that kind of communal, visible strength with the Middle East, a region marked by conflict where faith is described as quiet. So how does the message describe hope when expressing it openly could be dangerous? What does that quiet faith look like?
It's a completely different emotional architecture. In places where a big display of hope could attract danger, that resilience has to be internal. So hope is whispered. Prayer becomes an internal, quiet act. And strength isn't about big actions, it's measured by endurance. The ability to just maintain your integrity, your quiet resistance when everything outside is threatening. The source suggests that sometimes the biggest act of hope is just surviving another day without losing who you are.
And finally, that brings us to Europe and the Americas, where the struggles are often internal, right? They're not visible. They're masked by this surface prosperity. The source says loneliness shoots up in the winter, financial anxiety peaks at the end of the year, all while people are just going about their normal routines.
This is a really critical distinction. The burden here is often made worse by isolation, by the pressure to perform wellness. So for these regions, the source argues that the critical turning point is just the simple, honest act of admitting, I need help. In a culture where success is so often defined by being self-sufficient, the very first act of hope requires humility. It requires breaking that social contract of, I've got it all together.
That distinction you just made, it brings us perfectly to the framework for hope the message provides. That humility, that act of dropping the facade, that's the key. Hope begins when we stop pretending we're strong enough on our own.
And the role of recognition is so foundational to that. The message offers this psychological validation by saying, God sees the weight. Which, for any audience, really means your pain is seen. It's validated by something outside of yourself. It's not shaming you, it's revealing a truth. Some burdens were never meant for you to carry alone. The breakthrough is realizing the problem isn't your lack of strength. The problem is the impossible weight itself.
That shift from blaming yourself to seeing an external truth is so powerful. It lets you move from exhaustion to something like empowerment. And this leads us right into the distilled takeaways, the 5 actionable points the source presents. These really summarize that whole counter-narrative to self-blame.
Yes, they're designed to help you restructure your internal dialogue. They're like permission slips, really. Permission to step away from the pressure of constant performance. First one, you are not weak for feeling tired. Fatigue is just a natural response. It's not a moral failing.
Right.
Second, you are not failing because life feels heavy. The heaviness is a real global thing, not just you. Third, you are not alone in your struggle. This connects right back to that community resilience we saw. 4, God sees the weight you carry. Your burden is acknowledged. And finally, number 5, hope is still available even now. It reinforces that hope isn't about everything getting fixed at once. It's about persistence.
They really do give you permission to just feel what you're feeling without that added layer of pressure. And the message wraps up by making this abstract idea of release very practical. It details specific requests for outside support.
It does. It externalizes the solution. The final points are all about the need for systemic relief. It calls for peace in places of conflict, provision for financial hardship, healing for trauma, comfort for children, and then that final tangible act of releasing what you now recognize is just too heavy. It's a really comprehensive framework for dealing with burnout on both an emotional and a systemic level.
So what does this all mean for us? We've analyzed a message that's at its core about resilience. It brings together this acknowledgement of collective, global pain, economic, emotional, political, and then offers solutions based in community and this idea of radical humility.
Yeah.
Admitting you need help.
I think the central intellectual nugget is how the source frames our current exhaustion. It's very precise analysis of these societal burden systems failing, promises collapsing, gives us a really crucial lens for understanding why anxiety is so high everywhere. It's a sophisticated model. Exhaustion isn't always cured by rest. Sometimes it's cured by strategically letting go of an unmanageable weight.
Absolutely. And as we leave you to think about all this, let's connect that idea back to those 4 case studies. If the source is correct that hope begins when we stop pretending we are strong enough on our own, then maybe consider this. What structural supports in your community, your family, your work are failing right now? And which ones are proving to be unexpectedly resilient? And maybe think about the difference between that whispered hope of the Middle East, which is born out of necessity, and the community sharing in Africa, which is a proactive choice of mutual carriage.
That's a fascinating question for you to explore as you continue your own deep dive into what resilience looks like when the load is just universally too heavy.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive. We'll talk to you next time.